Baby mama. Baby mama, I'm tired of you.
Glass breaking, then silence, then another window. Somewhere in a motel on Wade Hampton Boulevard in Greenville, South Carolina. Someone was moving through the dark, room by room, searching. A guest named Samantha Rustler heard everything that night. She would later describe it in 4 sentences that are almost impossible to forget. They kept busting out windows until they found who they were looking for. Once they found him, they started yelling at him to come outside the room. Just come outside the room. She paused. Once he came out, that was it. It was November 19th, 2019, and the man those windows were being smashed for was 22-year-old David Marquise Edens Jr., a father of 2 who had spent weeks going on Facebook Live to show the whole world exactly who was after him. He laughed about it every single time. Hours before he died, he posted his final words on Facebook. "All I know is I will stay single for life before I enter another toxic relationship." He told everyone, and it still wasn't enough. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell us where in the world you are watching this from. People called him Duke, not David, not Junior. Duke. And if you spent 5 minutes on his Facebook page, you understood why. There was something about him that was larger than the name his parents gave him. Loud in the best way. Magnetic. The kind of person who could make a room laugh without even trying. He was born April 22nd, 1997, a Greenville, South Carolina kid through and through. Son of David Edens Sr. and Sharita Gorey. He grew up inside a big, close family, a sister, Murina, brothers David, Malik, and Melvin, grandparents Kyron Edens Jones and David Williams Jr., aunts, uncles, cousins, people who knew him his whole life and would tell you the same thing without being asked. He was a good person. At Carolina High School in Greenville County, he was just another kid finding his way. But after school, he found his voice. He started posting rap videos on Facebook, going live, letting people in, sharing the unfiltered version of his day, whether it was funny, frustrating, or somewhere in between. He went by Sosa Pack Sour online and built a real local following. Not because he was polished, but because he was completely, uncomplicatedly himself. And then came fatherhood. A daughter, Kalani. A son, Amir. Both born in Greenville. Both depending on a 22-year-old man who, by every account from people who loved him, was actually showing up. His father said it without hesitation. David was a good dad. What nobody knew yet was how much being that dad was about to cost him. Before you make up your mind about Kadesha Ayuna Bryson, sit with this for a moment. She was 25 years old, a mother, a woman working a cashier shift at a McDonald's in Greenville, South Carolina. Clocking in, clocking out, raising children, getting through the week the same way millions of people do. That is where she met David. Not in some dramatic setting, at work, across a counter, the most ordinary beginning imaginable. She was 3 years older than him, and people who knew her said that the intensity she brought into relationships was apparent long before David came along. Past partners had walked away describing the same thing, that being with Kadesha required something most people eventually found they could not give. When things ended, she did not quietly move on. She held on. She pushed. She came back. With David, that pattern did not just repeat. It escalated. Their relationship ran on a cycle of conflict and reunion that people around them watched with growing unease. Disputes, separations, moments where it seemed finished, and then it wasn't. Those close to the situation described it plainly. The relationship was filled with unresolved conflict and aggression that never found a release valve. What nobody fully understood yet was what happened inside Kadesha when David finally decided he was done for good. That answer was still coming. Picture this: a man behind the wheel of a rental car. Greenville, South Carolina. Phone propped up, camera on. Over 200 people watching live, and Kadesha Bryson right behind him. following him through traffic street after street, not letting up. What does David do? He laughs. That is the image that defines everything that came before November 19th. Not a single phone call to law enforcement, not a visit to a lawyer's office, not a restraining order, just a phone pointed at chaos, and an audience watching it like a show. The confrontations between David and Khadijah in the weeks before his death were documented almost entirely by David himself on Facebook Live. And they were not small. Khadijah followed his car through Greenville traffic at speed. She showed up wherever he went. During one incident, she poured liquid across the rental car David was sitting in while he sat inside filming her, pointing the camera directly at her face for his followers. He publicly questioned paternity, asking about a DNA test on camera in front of everyone watching. He mocked her, called her out, made her the centerpiece of content that hundreds of people tuned into like it was entertainment. And they treated it exactly that way. Comments flooding in. Viewer counts climbing past 140, past 200. People laughing in real time at a situation that was moving, slowly, steadily, towards something nobody in those comments was taking seriously enough to say out loud. But underneath all of it, David was running. He knew Khadijah had gotten him arrested before. He understood the position he was in, that fighting back physically or even defending himself would land him in handcuffs before she faced any consequences. So he drove circles through Greenville instead, past the Sphinx on the corner, through familiar streets, burning gas he barely had, talking to his phone because talking felt like the only leverage he had left. He said it plainly, right there on camera. I can't knock her out. She'll call the police. He mentioned getting a restraining order. He never followed through. And every time he laughed for that camera, every time he made it funny, the people watching had a little less reason to worry. That was the trap, and it was closing. 200 people. That is not a small number. That is a room full of people, watching in real time as David Edens Jr. drove through the streets of Greenville with Khadijah Bryson behind him and his gas gauge pushing empty. Not one of them called anyone. Consider what those viewers were actually looking at. A man circling the same blocks because he had nowhere safe to go. A man who had already told the camera he could not defend himself. A woman in a car right behind him who had already used the legal system as a weapon against him once before. All of it unfolding live, with the comment section full of jokes, fire emojis, and people hollering for more. Nobody said, "Go somewhere safe." Nobody said, "Get off the road." Nobody watching those streams treated what they were seeing as something that required them to do anything at all except keep watching. And that happened because of what David built. When real life gets packaged as entertainment, when danger gets framed as comedy, week after week, stream after stream, the audience stops reading the situation and starts enjoying it. The platform does not ask anything of the people consuming it. It just keeps the camera rolling. David gave his followers a front row seat to something they had no framework to understand as serious, because he had never once let them see it that way. Every laugh he performed made it harder for anyone to feel the weight of what was actually happening. Every stream he went live made Khadijah angrier, and she was watching every single one. The last thing David Edens Jr. posted on Facebook before that night was a statement about staying away from toxic relationships. Then the phone went quiet. It was Tuesday, November 19th, 2019. David had been living at the Motel 6 on Wade Hampton Boulevard in Greenville, not passing through, living there. It was where he had landed, a room at 2015 Wade Hampton Boulevard that he likely believed put enough distance between himself and the situation that had been consuming his life. He was wrong. Khadijah Ayuna Bryson arrived at that motel that night and moved straight through it with one intention. She went room to room along that property, and at each room that was not his, glass broke. Window after window. The sound carrying down the corridor, through the walls, into the rooms where other guests were trying to sleep. Samantha Russler was one of those guests. She heard every beat of what unfolded, the breaking glass moving closer, the search working its way methodically through the building, and then the moment it stopped. Because it found what it was looking for. A voice outside demanded David come out. He came out. What happened in the moments after that was confirmed by the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. Deputies were dispatched at 10:35 p.m. The call came in, logged as a burglary. When they arrived at 2015 Wade Hampton Boulevard, they found shattered glass across multiple rooms and David Edens Jr. unresponsive inside one of them. The Greenville County Coroner's Office ruled his death a homicide. He was 22 years old. Rustler later described the encounter with a clarity that stayed with everyone who heard it, that they kept going until they found him. Once they did, the yelling started, that he came out of that room. And that was it. Kadesha left the scene, but within hours she walked into the Greenville Police Department and turned herself in to law enforcement. When she did, she offered an explanation. The gun went off, she said, an accident. She never meant for any of it to happen. But Samantha Rustler had been on the other side of that wall the whole time. And she had heard the search. She had heard the broken glass. She had heard the demand that he step outside. Accidents do not search room by room. Accidents do not demand you come out. Less than 24 hours after David Edens Jr. was gone, Kadesha Ayuna Bryson was standing in a Greenville courtroom. She had been charged with 3 counts: murder, possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, and malicious damage to property. That third charge was for the windows. Every room she had worked through that night at the Motel 6, searching until she found the right one. It was Wednesday morning, November 20th, 2019. David's family sat in that courtroom less than a day removed from the worst news of their lives, and Kadesha stood before them. I love y'all. I'm sorry. The gun went off. I would never try to hurt him. He's a great dad. I'm sorry. The judge denied bond. She was remanded back to the Greenville County Detention Center. David's cousin Luquise Baldwin spoke to reporters outside. She was direct and left nothing unspoken. I didn't receive it at all. She apologized, but you had time to think. You went looking for him. Then David's father spoke. David Edens Sr. had described his son as a good dad, a present father, a man who showed up. Now he stood outside that Greenville courthouse and told the press where his focus was going to live from that point forward. It's all about the kids right now. He is gone. She is pretty much gone now. It is what it is. Making sure those kids are taken care of is all I'm concerned about right now. No rage, no performance. Just a father who had already decided what mattered most when everything else was gone. When something like this happens, the courtroom is not where the real damage lands. The real damage lands at home. David Edens Jr. left behind 2 children, a daughter, Kaloni, and a son, Amer, both in Greenville, both too young to understand what had just been taken from them, and both now growing up inside the space where their father used to be. Kaloni was barely a year old. She had no memory of any of it, not the Facebook Lives, not the arguments, not the chase through Greenville streets. She would grow up knowing her father only through what people chose to tell her, through photographs, through stories, through a family trying to keep someone alive in the memory of a child who never got the chance to know him. Same with Amir. Behind them stood an entire family in Greenville. Parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, absorbing a loss that arrives without warning and stays without permission. His cousin Louise Baldwin said the only thing that could be said. I just want to know why. Why did she do this? And then there was the other side. Kadesha's children, also in Greenville, also waking up to a world where their mother was gone. Not to grief, to a detention center. The circumstances were different. The absence was the same. One night on Wade Hampton Boulevard reached into 2 families and left neither of them whole. 2 families, both broken. Neither one asked to be. Kadesha Ayuna Bryson has been in custody since November 19th, 2019. That was over 6 years ago. As of 2026, no completed trial, no plea agreement, and no final sentencing in this case appears in any confirmed public record. The case against her remains unresolved. What the courts have done with it in the time since her arrest has not surfaced in any verifiable source. The case is still open. David Edens Jr. would have been 29 years old this year. Kalani and Amir are growing up in Greenville, in the same city, on the same streets, under the same South Carolina sky. Without him, justice moves slowly. There is a conversation this case forces that most people are not comfortable having. According to the CDC, 1 in 9 men in the United States experience severe physical violence from an intimate partner. In 2019, the same year David Edens Jr. lost his life, nearly 2.85 million men were recorded as domestic violence victims nationwide. Male victimization is consistently underreported, consistently underdiscussed, and almost never the first thing anyone pictures when this topic comes up. David's case is the reason that matters. People saw a young man with a phone and a crowd, loud, funny, performing. Nobody looked at those Facebook live streams and thought, this man is in danger and has nowhere to go. They looked at him and saw content. And that gap, between what something looks like and what it actually is precisely where David fell through. The camera did not keep David safe. It kept him visible. Those are not the same thing. Documentation is not protection. An audience is not a safety plan. And packaging danger as entertainment does not make it smaller. It just guarantees more people are watching when it gets worse. He deserved better than an audience. Now, if someone you follow online showed you exactly what David showed his followers, would you do something different?